Welcome to Put a Word on It, a podcast presented by Men of Valor. In each episode, we're going to talk with a different man, but each one with a unique journey from brokenness to freedom. I'm your host, Rudy Kalis. I spent over 40 years as a TV sportscaster, then retired and joined the Men of Valor program as a volunteer. So join the conversation. Reconciling men to God, their families, and society. Welcome to Put a Word on It. You know, some people learn the hard way. I like to think I'm one of those. All the mistakes I made as a kid growing up, flunking out of college, having to go into the military, making mistakes in my job, frustration, finally gave my life to Christ on October 10th, 1978. 12:30, window seat at downtown restaurant in Nashville. I know the minute, the day, the hour. I didn't walk out of there with a halo around my head. But he grabbed me somehow and began to change me, took the slack out of my leash. I like people like that. I like people that have made mistakes and keep getting up. Maybe they learned the hard way, but God always said, forgive them 7 times 70. And there we go. That's why I want you to meet AC. He's one of those. It took him a while because of the mistakes in his life and the things that he went through in his life. But boy, is he alive right now. Here's AC. AC, you're my kind of guy, because it took you a while to get this thing figured out right and to become fully engaged. What, you left a couple times and then came back?
Yes, sir. While I was in prison, I was involved in the Men of Valor Ministries, the Jericho Project on the inside. And I really had a zeal because I was just coming into my first experiences with Christ and learning who he was. But I was more of a Pharisee. So I was chasing the word of God in the sense of trying to become knowledgeable. And so every time I got out, I was trying to walk by the law. And so I would get out, and I could do that only so long within myself, and I would end up relapsing. So that's how I ended up giving it 3 tries. I ended up relapsing and going back to prison 3 times. And by the grace of God, the ministry accepted me back each time and continued to work with me.
But that's like a lot of guys, aren't there? The guys that we deal with, they always feel like 20% wanted. 20% of the other man, they're just getting in there because it might look good on their parole hearing. But the guys in the middle are trying to get a handle on this, and that's what you had to go through.
Because I came from a military background, and the way that I was raised was being a perfectionist, and so I thought that the knowledge would carry me through the whole time. So when I would get out, I still didn't have a genuine relationship with the Lord. So I found myself just being able to change back. Even though I wanted change, I found myself changing back to the person that I once was because I didn't know how to deal with life because I didn't have an authentic relationship with the Lord. I grew up in a home that was very dysfunctional. My mom was young when she had me. She was 18 and she wanted a perfect child. I was her first child, and she didn't really know how to raise a child outside of the way that she was raised. So she pretty much tried to create a perfect child in the sense of I got a whooping every day in many different forms and fashions. And I did schoolwork. I wasn't allowed to have friends. I wasn't allowed to go out. So my mom was an authoritarian in a great measure. And it was very difficult for me because I grew up as a fearful, timid little boy and didn't know how to live life like a child did. So I think I missed most of my childhood. So when I got a chance to get away at the age of 18 and go into the military, I started going buck wild because I was experiencing life for the first time. And then, as you know, the culture of the military is that they drink. And so before I knew it, I had become an alcoholic, and that started a trend of a lot of dysfunction in my life.
Why did you get arrested?
I ended up getting honorably discharged from the military. One night I went out after my father passed in 1992. I went out and I was in a bar, and a couple of guys got into a fight, and I tried to break the fight up. And this is kind of funny. Back then, cashmere was still kind of fashionable, and so I had on a cashmere coat. The drink got on my coat, and when I tried to come back through the gates, the MP smelled the alcohol, and they gave me a breathalyzer. And so at that time, I was doing really well in the military. I advanced pretty quick, and this is the first time I ever seen a man cry for me. The captain of my unit said that because of the rapidness of, in that time there was a lot of alcohol, DUIs and stuff going on, I had to be the one that he'd making an example out of. And he said, I have no choice. I have to reduce you down in rank. So I got reduced down in rank to a Spec 4. And for me, that was like starting over because I was an E5 promotable sergeant. And so they gave me an option. I could either get out, start over. So I opted to get out and take the severance pay.
And that in turn just kind of made that rebel inside of you go even wilder?
Yeah, I just started going downhill from that point. Got home and started experimenting with drugs, and that led me down a path of destruction.
Man, when you wind up in prison and those gates, those doors slam, reality hits, doesn't it?
Yes, sir.
At what point do you sit there and say, man, I got to do something else? There's got to be a God, because guys come in there and tell you that you need to change your life and He's your way, don't they?
Yes, they do. And when I was first introduced to God or Jesus, it was because some guys were standing around my bunk inside of incarceration having a prayer call. And I'm like, what are these guys doing? But it intrigued me. And I started talking with some of the guys there and started learning a little bit about Jesus. But when I entered into the Men of Valor program inside the prison, I walked through those doors desiring change. And like I mentioned earlier, because of my experience and seeing how life takes a turn, and if you're not doing it with Christ, if Christ isn't the source, then you're going to be able to change back. So I came in with an attitude that I wanted change, but I also discovered in those 3 relapses that I always had the option to change back. That's when I realized that I need to be transformed. And the Bible tells us we need to be transformed by the renewing of our minds. And that's what's happened for me.
And after about 9 years or so that you've been in the program, you're in leadership, the reality of it, now you're really trying to change other men's lives through the program, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm actually, like Paul said, the things that happened to me in my past has actually turned out for the furtherance of the gospel.
It's wonderful in that regard.
Yes.
Carl Carlson Award, you've won that.
Yes,
which is for the best, employee. Did you exemplify what this program stands for? How much does that mean to you?
It means a lot because my relationship with Carl was very meaningful. Carl believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. So to receive that reward was the highest honor I've ever obtained in my life. I'm grateful for it. And I hope it brings a smile to Carl's face because I live my life for the Lord. But because of Carl and men like Carl, Tevin, and Kurt believing in me and mentoring me and discipling me, that made all the difference in the world. And that's really why I'm sitting here today.
The name of the program is Put a Word on It.
Yes, sir.
So if I asked you to put a word on it, what would you tell me?
Right now in this season, I want my life to demonstrate the power of the gospel. So that's what's been resounding in my spirit in this season because I just feel like I can become better at what God has called me to do. I know my character defects. I know what could draw me away and make me fall in a sense. So because I'm in a position that I've been called to, I really want to allow my light to shine for Jesus and that my life would demonstrate that the gospel is the power that changes. You know, in Romans 1:16 it says that we're not ashamed of the gospel because it is the power of God that brings forth salvation. And so I want these men on this campus to know that.
I tell you what, somebody meets you and they see that spirit and you've got that gentleness and that smile about you, let me tell you, your light shines, AC. You're a good man.
Thank you, Rudy.
Pleasure to be with you, my friend.
Thank you.
So let me put a word on it myself. I love listening to him. I love the idea of him being faithful. Because I've kind of learned that going into prison, these guys kept saying the first few times, they said, are you coming back? You coming back? Because they get a lot of guys that come in there and spend a week or a day, and all of a sudden, hey, I'll check you later, and they're gone for 6 months. No, if you go back week after week after week, all of a sudden they say, man, he is for real. And that's what being faithful means. And that's what AC is now. He's got to be faithful. He's got to live up to what he's telling these guys here at Men of Valor to do. They're getting out of prison, and he's saying, look at me. Look at the way I've changed my life in these 10 years. You can do it too. You got to be faithful and stay with it. That's a wonderful word. And that's why I love doing it. So thanks for joining us. Join us again next time for Put a Word on It.